Hi, everyone. We are back again with another Risk Insurance Dialogues interview. Today we have Nikki Brandt. She is the founder and president at NB Talent. So thank you so much, Nikki, for being here today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course. So to get us started, before we start with our questions, can you just give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure. I've been in the insurance industry since 2007. Started out as a commercial underwriter, moved over to the broker side, was a commercial producer for 5 years. Kind of always had the entrepreneurial itch. COVID kind of thrust me from career person to, work from home mom for a period of time. And I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I loved having the career piece of me, but I think that period of COVID being home more did kind of, give me a glimpse into like what I was missing with my kids. And so I decided, throughout that whole year of chaos that we all kind of survived, I just decided that I wanted to be self-employed to have more flexibility and time with my family. So I decided to start a recruiting firm in the industry that I'd spent my entire career in. Seemed like kind of a logical fit. So I took the leap. That's been, coming up on 5 years now. Still in it, still surviving. All is well, surviving entrepreneurship. But I have a husband who's also in the industry in commercial insurance. He works for a large broker here in our area and two kids, they're 10 and 7, that keep me super busy. So just, mom life, career life, juggling all the things.
Yes, that sounds like you're definitely very busy.
Yes.
Um, so to jump us off here, since you have kind of been doing this a while, you've been around the block a couple of times, can you get us started with kind of talking about what makes a candidate or someone who's maybe newer in the industry or applying for jobs, what makes them stand out today in the insurance industry?
Yeah, so I think, the two things that really, or three things, I guess, that I think kind of make a candidate stand out to me are a strong and positive online presence. A lot of people are looking on, social media or other pages when they're looking at a candidate for a position. So I think having a professional and up-to-date LinkedIn page, being mindful that your, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, is professional and not having stuff out there that you wouldn't want a future or a possible employer to see. So just a really like professional kind of buttoned up online presence as much as possible is I think important. I think having a strong work ethic, recognizing that insurance is a very complex beast and it takes time to learn that, and you're not going to be an expert overnight. Just being okay with that and having the drive and work ethic and the desire to learn, and demonstrating that to a future employer that you are willing to put in the work. And then, a third with that, I would say, is insurance designations, I think are great. I think the CPCU is probably regarded as like your master's in insurance. So I think that's a great one for people, especially those on the carrier side, to aspire to. CIC is a great one for the broker world, but I do think that getting that broad perspective of the industry and just dedicating your, putting some time and showing your future employer that you are willing to put in your time to learn, kind of on your own time, largely. I just think shows a really strong like work ethic and a desire to learn and to grow. So those are some things that I look for.
Yeah, definitely. And that's we talk about designations a lot here as well as kind of the LinkedIn presence, your online presence. So I love that you brought that up as well because it is so important. And then so if someone say, is starting out in the insurance industry, kind of getting their feet wet with everything, is there a specific maybe piece of advice or something you would tell them before entering? Because this is kind of a very unique field in a way. So is there something that you would say maybe as a heads up to someone coming in?
Well, I don't know about a heads up per se, but I would say, I know there are, especially larger organizations on the carrier and broker side that give internships. Even, I hate to say it has to be unpaid, but even if it's unpaid, like if you can get some exposure, into the landscape of all the different insurance jobs that are out there. Like if you can get that, even if it has to be unpaid, I mean, ideally an internship, you'd love that to be paid. But I think just that exposure to all those things would be super invaluable. The agency that I worked for example, we had a program where um, intern would come in and do like I can't remember how long it was, maybe a week or 2 weeks or something with risk control. And then they did a stint with claims, sales, service, 5 or 6 different kind of exposures to the industry. And oftentimes people will come in thinking they wanted to be in risk control, end up leaning towards sales. Or vice versa. So I think that's a really great way, because when you're considering a career in insurance, probably you knew somebody who told you to, because nobody else really, people don't really know about our field. Like for me, my father-in-law introduced me to it. I would not be here otherwise. So I didn't know what an underwriter was. I just knew that the starting salary was double what I was making in PR. So I was like, sign me up. So I think that if we have, if you have an internship program that you can look into, or even if you just ask around and try to find someone who's kind of like a mentor in the industry who has some connections to maybe be able to set you up with a company that could give you, even if it's just like a week or 2 weeks of shadowing a company to see kind of the different areas. Claims is a very different job than sales, is a very different job than risk control. So I think that, showing people coming into the industry what these different avenues are firsthand can be a really great way for someone to kind of figure out where their place in the industry might be.
Definitely. That's a great point. And you know, when someone is kind of coming in, like you said, they are normally brought in by someone they know, so they get a bit of a heads up of kind of what they're getting into, but still kind of taking that leap and getting your feet wet in a bunch of different areas. That's great exposure for
Yeah.
anyone. And when with regards to like the application, the interview process, once you figure out you want to be in this industry, you pick a role that you want to apply for, what have you, what are maybe some common mistakes, missteps that you see happening in that application interview process?
So I think the biggest one, I don't know if this is really a mistake so much as it is something to be aware of, is the reality is that insurance is largely, yes, there's some like more tech forward type firms, but largely it's kind of an old school industry still. And so I think it's important to remember that you've got people in management who are usually doing the, interviewing process, are Gen X, millennial, even maybe some boomers who are still around. Those are the folks that are doing the interview process, and these are folks that are in their 40s or above, oftentimes, and they are a little bit more. I don't want to say traditional, but they came up at a time where you wear a suit to an interview and you went into an office, and just a very different mindset than the 20 somethings have kind of come up with. And so I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong. I'm a big advocate for remote work personally, but I do think it's important to remember who you're talking to, like who your audience is. So, I think sometimes if the environment of a company, for example, is like super casual, right? People will show up to an interview in like jeans and a t-shirt, and it's like, well, you might be able to be casual once you work there, but you want to really present yourself in a professional way for the interview process, because you're supposed to put your best foot forward. You're interviewing with someone who is going to likely have a more traditional, mindset than you are. So I think it's important to make sure that you kind of know your audience and you're showing up in such a way that those folks are going to, not look at you in an unprofessional way. And then I would say two other things would be, remote work. I'm a huge advocate for it. I think it's great. I especially think it's awesome and works really, really well when someone already knows what they're doing. Let's say you've been an account manager or an underwriter for 10 or 15 years and you want to do that from home. I think that can work really, really well. You know the team, you know what you're doing, like whatever, you're trained. I think it's harder for somebody who's brand new to the industry to learn a new system, a totally new product, learn all the coverages, learn all the markets, whatever the case may be, kind of on an island. Like it definitely can be done. I've seen it done, but I do think there's a lot of value, specifically with like the speed of a learning curve, for somebody to be able to turn their chair around and ask the guy behind them, like, hey, I think back to my experience, like how do I underwrite a wood manufacturer? What do I ask about a wood manufacturer? And the guy behind me telling me, here's the questions I would ask. So I think it's just a matter of keeping an open mind to set yourself up for success in your career. Remote work and flexibility is probably the goal for most of us, but I think it's important to remember that in any career path, not just insurance, I think oftentimes your first job isn't going to be the dream job, right? It's the place where you cut your teeth, learn the ropes, learn the meat of what you're doing. And so I would just look at it as simply that, like your training ground to learn and develop and your starting point. And then from there, as you learn, as you grow, you'll be more marketable, and you'll be able to kind of pivot and then over time work into a situation where maybe flexibility or remote work is the priority. But I do think sometimes, I've had candidates turn down opportunities because it's not remote, or maybe there's a week of training in office required. They turn that down. They don't want to go in. And it's like, I do think that's kind of a mistake. I think that that job doesn't have to be your forever job, but I think if you can get out of it what you can, it can set you up for success much more quickly than being 100% remote on day one in a brand new industry and a brand new job.
Yeah, and it is hard to, like you said, learn something completely remote. When, especially if it's a new field, you have no clue, you don't know what a claim is, you don't know, XYZ. So to learn that remotely does add another barrier. Whereas if you're in person, you get that exposure, like you said. So definitely, I 100% agree with that. And with regards to your job and your company, is there a particular part of your job that you find the most rewarding? I know you deal with a lot of, candidates and all these different, jobs that you have to kind of match people up with in a way. Is there something that you really enjoy about what you do?
Yeah, I think really it's the matchmaking piece of it. For a candidate maybe who's fantastic, has worked for one company for 20 years, let's say, and they have 5 days a week in the office, no flexibility. Their pay is $30,000 below what they could get in the market elsewhere, but they don't even know what they don't know. And we have that conversation, and I kind of open their eyes to how great they are. Help them get a stronger resume, and we take them out to a couple of different companies, and they end up landing a job that's hybrid or fully remote. They're making 20 or 30 grand more. They just have a whole new perspective, and they often will come back and be like, wow, I didn't even know this is possible. Like, thank you. Like, that to me is like on a personal level really rewarding. And then kind of the flip side too. I have a couple of clients, mid-sized brokers, 30, 50 man shops. I have a really great client in central Pennsylvania here. I have another one in Nashville that are kind of that size, that are really awesome places to work, great cultures, kind of up and comer agencies, I would say. And I've placed some awesome candidates with them that would never have even known they existed, just because they're not big enough to be on a national stage yet. But the candidates that I placed there, I check in with them, 3 months, 6 months, a year in, and they're talking about how there's so much opportunity for growth and the culture's great and they're so happy to be there. And so I think it's really cool that, like, someone in a state on the, northern part of the coast now has a connection with an employee down here in the South, and they would never have, connected if not for me, and both sides are very happy. So it's kind of cool to help a lesser known, smaller agency have access to talent like that they would not have otherwise, connected with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great part of this industry is, and what you do is being able to connect people like that. And it's definitely very important to, all of these, especially the smaller companies as well as the larger companies, to have someone like you that can really match people up and get, the correct candidates to the correct jobs. So what you do is definitely very important.
I appreciate
And
that. It's interesting because there's not one like a one size fits all, right? Like, I talk to candidates every day, and sometimes they tell me they want, this level of stress, or lack of stress. This size of a book is comfortable for them to service, or they like small business, or they like large accounts, or they like love sales, or they hate sales, or whatever. And they kind of go through, and it really is for me like matchmaking, because two people can have the exact same experience or skill set, but really identify with and fit culturally with two very different companies. So I have clients that are, like I said, small, mid-sized brokers, and I have national broker clients as well as carrier clients of different sizes. And talking to a person for 45 minutes, I can kind of figure out what a good place for them might be, and what's a fit for this person over here might not at all be a fit for this person. And it's through no fault of either candidate or either company. It's just really about, it's like marriage, right? Finding two people or two sides that are a good mutual fit. And so I think, having been around the block for a while, it's like I can hear what someone's looking for, and if I know my client company's culture and market position and all that really well, it's much easier as we're talking and getting to know each other. I can kind of in my brain like put the pieces together and say, okay, you probably would not like this client, but I think you'd love it over here. And so that for me is just rewarding to kind of make those connections.
Yeah, that's really amazing. It really is, and it's such a cool part of, this industry or any industry as well. I think it's such an amazing role. So I always love hearing about it and hearing kind of about the thought process.
Yeah.
Our last question to kind of wrap things up, what is a piece of advice, career advice, or just advice about, the industry in general that you would give or that a young professional, new insurance professional should know or just you would like for them to have?
I would say my best piece of advice is to have patience. I think that, when you first start out, whether you're learning sales or service on the broker side or underwriting maybe on the carrier side or claims, like if I think back to my first 6 months year on the desk, like it was really boring, like painfully boring, right? I'm like reading about general liability coverage and I'm understanding what an underwriter does. And most days, I was like, have I picked the right career path? Like, this is painful. Everyone around me was, I mean, this was 20 years ago. Everyone around me is much, much older. There was no one young in the industry. And I'm like, what have I done? And it was like, what have I gotten myself into? But I was like, you know what? It's my father-in-law was like, this is a great career path. You're a people person, stick with it. So I trusted him. And so what I found was after sticking with it, it really was just a people business. That to me was like the thing that stood out. It was a people business. Insurance was just the product. It was the meat. It was the thing that we sold or underwrote or serviced or whatever. And so I started to see people around me having all these opportunities for promotion and growth and earning. And then when I went to the broker side, kind of the same thing. Like it sucked being brand new and cold calling and grinding, but once I got my feet under me and started really like having some success, like I really started to see the earning potential and that side of things too. And so I think if somebody's brand new, no matter what the role is, it can be boring at first. It can seem kind of redundant, and insurance is not the most sexy or exciting or glamorous career path on paper, but I think most people who are, let's say, in their 40s who've been at it for 20 years would tell you that they're probably out earning a lot of their friends. Once they're trained and know what they're doing, they probably have a pretty good bit of flexibility. And so I think that long game, the opportunity for growth, for earning, for sure stability, it checks all the boxes, but it's just not something that on day one is going to be as exciting or glamorous as maybe some other fields. So I think it's just a matter of like learning from people who are, older, wiser, who have gone before you. They're telling you to stick with it, hang in there, it'll pay off, like it truly does. So just try to think long game and see the potential versus, focusing too much on the, how exciting is my first 6 months or a year on the desk.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that would go for a lot of, new roles or new professionals. When you come in, your first, like you said, 6 months are not going to be groundbreaking. It's going to be
Yeah.
where you really get your feet wet and figure out, what you're doing, in
Yeah.
a way. So that's a great point.
Well, and I think, I think too, it's like people sometimes are short-sighted. I can think of a gentleman that I worked with earlier on in my career, and I was like 6 or 8 years in, and it was his first year, and they basically wanted him to, learn the meat of the job of the insurance coverages before putting him out in the field. And he was in it for 3 or 4 months, and he was like, God, this is boring. And he jumped ship to go sell like, I don't know, telecommunications. And 6 months down the line, he was like, oh, I'm making so much more than I was making, doing this job over here in insurance. But I would almost bet you that like if you fast forward 15 years, like he might have been out earning his friends who were just out of school at that point, but I bet if you fast forward 10 or 15 years, I would venture to guess that his, equivalents who would have stuck it out in insurance are probably out earning him. So it's like it might pay you more now, but I think long game, the opportunity for the earning is much higher in a lot of professions, especially in sales on the insurance side than let's say other B2B sales paths. So I think it's just a matter of like understanding that you'll be better at sales once you learn the meat of the product. And just having that patience, knowing that you'll get there when all your friends might be doing something that seems a little bit more, glamorous or exciting in the moment. Like just put your head down and grind. Like you'll be glad that you did.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again. This is great.